My name is Henry, and not too long ago, I used to work at a pizza place. It was a decent job, nothing too exciting, but it paid the bills. Little did I know that one particular customer would turn my life upside down. There was this weird guy who would order a pizza every now and then. He looked creepy as hell, with his sunken eyes and unkempt appearance. And the way he acted, it was just off. Sometimes he'd ask these unsettling questions that made my skin crawl. Like, had anyone ever beaten me up before? Or would anyone be sad if I died? He even asked if I was afraid of death. Who the hell asks that to a pizza delivery guy? This went on for months. Every Friday evening, right before closing time, he'd place his order. Nobody at the pizza joint liked delivering to this weirdo, but company policy said we couldn't refuse a paying customer. So, more often than not, I'd end up being the one to take his pizza. One Friday night, the dreaded call came in, and once again, I found myself driving out to this guy's place. He lived on the outskirts of town, right next to a dense forest that seemed to stretch on forever. As I pulled up to his house, I noticed how eerily quiet it was. The only sound was the crunching of gravel beneath my feet as I made my way to his front door. I rang the doorbell, but no one answered. I tried again, but still, nothing. That's when I heard a noise behind me. I turned around and saw a figure standing by my car, holding a baseball bat. It was too dark to make out his face, but I recognized his voice.
"Are you ready to feel some pain, Henry?"
He asked, his tone dripping with malice. My heart nearly leapt out of my chest. It was the creepy customer. I stammered something about not wanting any trouble, but he started walking towards me, his grip tightening on the bat. I dropped the pizza on his doorstep and bolted, running along the side of his house. He chased after me, but I was faster. I managed to outpace him and disappeared into the woods. Behind me, I could hear his threatening shouts, but they grew fainter as I put more distance between us. Then, I heard the sickening sound of metal striking metal, like something out of a movie. He was smashing my car with the baseball bat, his enraged screams echoing through the night, but there was no way in hell I was going back. My beat-up old car wasn't worth risking my life over. When I was far enough away, I called the cops. For what felt like an eternity, I hid behind a large tree in that godforsaken forest. The violent noises had died down, but I was still terrified. I pressed myself against the rough bark, afraid to move a muscle, convinced that at any moment, the madman with the bat would appear. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made my heart race. Time seemed to stand still. When I finally heard the distant wail of police sirens, I had a decision to make. After a moment's hesitation, I cautiously made my way back through the woods, towards the house and my wrecked car. I had no idea where the guy was. He could have been inside, out in the forest, or anywhere else. All I knew was that I didn't want to be anywhere near that lunatic. As I emerged from the trees, I saw the extent of the damage to my car. It was my first vehicle, and seeing it in such a state was gut-wrenching. But the relief I felt when I spotted the police officers was indescribable. It turned out that after the whole ordeal, the guy had simply taken the pizza, gone back inside, and was calmly eating it in front of the TV when the cops showed up. He denied everything, of course, but the bat with fresh marks on it told a different story. The police took him into custody, and I later found out that there had been numerous complaints about his behavior from neighbors and others. Clearly, he had some serious issues. With my car totaled, I couldn't continue working as a pizza delivery driver, so I had to quit my job. It was a hell of a way to end my time there, but I'm just grateful to have made it out of that nightmare in one piece. I still have trouble sleeping some nights, remembering the terror I felt in those woods, with a madman hot on my heels. It's an experience I wouldn't wish on anyone. I've been delivering pizzas for 6 months to chip away at a heap of student loans. It wasn't a passion, it was a necessity. You'd think schlepping pizzas would be uneventful, but one Friday night proved me dead wrong. It was the kind of shift that turned my blood cold and left me questioning the safety of what I thought was a simple job. That night, a misty rain was falling, blurring the streetlights into halos as I loaded up my old car with what was supposed to be my last delivery of the evening. The order came from a new development, an affluent enclave on the outskirts where the homes were fortresses and the residents liked their privacy. The potential for a hefty tip had me pushing the speed limit. The house I pulled up to was stark and modern. its clean lines slicing through the foggy night like something out of a noir film. It was the last house before the woods began, where the dark seemed to swallow everything, even the sound of the rain. When I rang the bell, holding 2 large pepperoni pizzas, the door eventually swung open. Standing there was a woman, probably in her mid-30s, with a rehearsed smile. She mentioned she forgot her wallet and would be right back, inviting me inside to escape the chill. Against my better judgment, compelled by her friendly demeanor, I stepped inside. The moment the door clicked shut, the warmth of the house couldn't stave off the shiver that ran down my spine. The air felt thick, heavy with a sense of impending doom. I barely had time to register my discomfort when a deep, rough voice from the shadows commanded,
Move to the living room.
I turned and found myself staring down the barrel of a gun, held by a tall, shadowy figure. My heart raced, panic setting in. As I walked towards the living room, the minimalism I noticed was unsettling. No furniture, no pictures, just cold, empty space. In the living room, the starkness was even more pronounced. The man, still obscured in the dim light, demanded my wallet and phone. Reluctantly, I handed them over, along with the little cash I had, barely enough to mention. The woman, now more an accomplice than hostess, methodically patted me down and snatched my car keys, tossing them to the man. His next order froze me to the core.
Strip,
he said, a sinister tone in his voice that told me this was no ordinary robbery. Trembling, I complied, my mind racing with fear. What would come next? They collected my clothes, leaving me with nothing but my own vulnerability. Don't leave this house, he warned before they both exited, locking the door behind them. The sound of my car starting up was a cruel goodbye as they disappeared with it into the night. There I was, alone and naked in a strange, empty house. Panic turned to survival instinct. I scoured the house and found nothing but an empty cardboard box to cover myself. With no other choice, I ventured back into the cold, rainy night. The streets were eerily silent, most houses dark and seemingly empty. Desperation drove me to the only house with lights on. I ran across the slick, cold pavement, clutching the cardboard to my chest. I rang the bell, each chime echoing like a lifeline. A man answered, his initial shock at my appearance quickly turning to concern. He let me in without a word, called the police, and handed me a blanket and a cup of hot tea, which I clutched gratefully, trying to steady my shaking hands. The police arrived and listened to my harrowing story with somber expressions. They promised a thorough investigation and gave me a ride home, a small comfort after such a terror-filled night. That was my last night delivering pizzas. No job is worth facing such terror. I've been delivering pizzas for a few years now, mostly without incident. But there's one night that sticks with me, the kind that makes you reconsider everything. It was late, maybe around 10 p.m., and I had one last delivery before I could clock out. The address was on a street I didn't know well, tucked away in a quieter part of town. As I pulled up to the house, everything seemed normal at first. I parked my car under a streetlight, grabbed the pizza, and locked up. But as I made my way to the front door, I heard raucous laughter and shouting nearby. I glanced over and saw a group of 3 guys hanging out by the sidewalk. They weren't doing anything outright hostile at that moment, but their energy felt off. They were too loud, too unpredictable. I tried to keep my head down and continue on my path, hoping to avoid any interaction. But as I passed by them, trying to give a wide berth, it all went south. One of them, a tall guy with a mean look in his eye, stepped right in front of me.
Nice pizza you got there.
He sneered, and before I knew what was happening, he snatched the box right out of my hands. "Hey, that's not yours," I protested, anger flaring up as I reached for the box. I should have just let it go, but in the moment, all I could think about was not letting these guys bully me. That was a mistake. As soon as I grabbed the pizza back, the other 2 were on me. One punched me in the stomach, knocking the wind out of me, and the other hit me across the face. I stumbled back, dropping the pizza as I fell to the ground. They were on top of me in an instant, rifling through my pockets, taking my wallet and phone. Somehow, I managed to get up and stagger to the customer's house. I rang the doorbell, and when the customer, a middle-aged woman, answered, she could immediately see I was in bad shape.
What on earth happened?
She gasped as she helped me inside. I explained the situation between shallow breaths, trying to calm down. She was incredibly kind, helping me sit down and immediately calling the police. When the officers arrived, I gave them as much detail as I could, but my hope of them catching the guys was slim. They took notes and promised to look into it, but everyone seemed to know those guys were long gone. After the police left, the customer thanked me for still trying to deliver the pizza, despite what had happened, and offered to drive me back to my car. I declined, saying I could manage. I thanked her for her kindness and walked back to where I had parked, my body aching with every step. That's when I heard it again. That same loud, obnoxious laughter from before. My heart raced as I picked up my pace, almost running to my car. Just as I got in and locked the doors, the three thugs rounded the corner. They saw me, and their faces lit up with twisted excitement. They started shouting and running towards me. Panic took over. I started the car and slammed it on the gas just as one of them threw something that thudded against the window. A can, maybe from a beer or soda. It didn't break the glass, but it scared me enough to not look back. I sped away, watching in the rearview mirror as they chased after the car for a block before giving up. That night, I drove home shaking, replaying the incident over and over in my mind. I kept delivering pizzas after that, but I was never quite as carefree. Every shift, especially those late-night ones, I was reminded of that night. The fear, the helplessness, and the narrow escape. It was a story I'd tell new drivers, not to scare them, but to remind them always to be aware and stay safe. It's a wild world out there, and you never know what's waiting around the corner.